Now, to wrap up our discussions about ebooks, I want to touch on OER, which stands for Open Education Resources, and how it relates to deaf learners. OEP refers to Open Educational Practices, which constitute a range of practices. These practices include the creation of resources, how the resources are used, the management of the open resources, with the intention to improve deaf education. And the final practice is to innovate and reimagine deaf education on a global scale. Open education is based on 5 principles, which guide our decisions and practices. The first principle of open education requires us to collaborate and share freely and equally with others all resources. We must connect, create, and maintain networks in order to share and learn about open education, access, resources, teaching, and learning practices. In the same vein, creating communities of practice in order to collectively grow our knowledge and resources and to support the efforts of others. Another principle of open education is continuous assessment. Continued evaluation of the work to determine how open education approaches can be improved for the betterment of all. Research can lead to serendipitous findings and lead to innovations not foreseen. There are 8 attributes to open education pedagogy. The first is participatory technology. Everyone who wishes to participate is openly welcomed. It includes community building, interactivity, and sharing. Duties, responsibilities, and activities are done collaboratively. Pedagogies should be innovative and creative. Build on the work of others' OER. Creativity supports the learning process. As mentioned before, open education means sharing ideas and resources. This is key. Teaching and creating materials needs to be a reflective practice. Consider past success and fit for the learners your lessons have had or not. What could be changed? Open education requires participants to come with an open mind, to be trusting and trustworthy, professional, and respectful discussions are welcomed. Malicious comments and criticisms are not. Open education should uplift everyone. The foundation of open education is being connected to a community. The knowledge that you can provide support and receive support when needed. You are part of a community. Open education pedagogy should be encouraging students to create their own products to share with others. Peer reviews or evaluations of our practices, resources, and approaches should be welcomed as a means to consider and reflect on modifications or adaptations that will improve the quality of our work. Research indicates that the problem with the current state of open education resources and practices is that they don't support the language considerations for deaf learners. Language considerations adds an additional layer of complexity. So I am now adding a 9th attribute to open education pedagogy: language practices. Open education resources can be excellent products, created with universal design principles in mind, making them accessible to many diverse learners. But we must consider carefully the inclusion of sign language translations. How can we work with open education resources as they currently exist? In most cases, creating access to current OER for deaf learners requires translation. Sign language is not universal. Each country has at least one sign language, just as each country has at least one spoken language. The population of deaf people relative to hearing people in any given region is small, very small, which means the number of qualified people to provide translation services for ebooks is even smaller. Because of this, a number of issues become apparent. The first consideration is determining who is qualified to do the translations. Do interpreters have the requisite qualifications and skills? Do deaf community members have the requisite qualifications and skills? Teaching credentials for teachers of the deaf is not standardized. Required qualifications range widely depending on the region. Another consideration is how the translation will be paid for. Producing a translated ebook requires cameras, lights, editing technology, space, wardrobe, supplementary materials, and books may be an additional expense. The preparation time and labor of the translator, how will those costs be covered? These translation expenses are in addition to the cost of the original ebook. Another consideration is how much of the OER can be translated. Producing proper translation takes a lot of time. Can the appropriate equipment, such as cameras, be secured? Technical support during the editing and uploading processes will be needed. Who can oversee all of this? Here's another consideration. Who is qualified to evaluate the quality of the translation? Who has the power to decide the translation is done well enough? The ultimate power of quality control belongs where? It is important that deaf people are involved in the process. When we consider all the effort put into creating the existing ebooks, which have been done mostly by hearing people, perhaps some deaf people. Are ebook creators inviting deaf people to participate in production processes? We need to recognize there are a number of interested parties involved in creating ebooks. UNICEF has identified various stakeholders and their roles in the creation of ebooks. Firstly, the Ministry of Education for the country in question has the power to create policy to encourage or mandate the development or procurement of ebooks. It has the policy-making power to create standards, to determine who can use resources and how they can be used. Publishers have the platform to make accessible content available to teachers using UDL principles. Their role is publishing and distribution. Technologists consider the best design and how to technically incorporate accessible functions and features to meet the ebook learner's needs. Teachers curate the materials, design and plan the lessons to meet curriculum goals. Obviously, another stakeholder is the end user of the ebook. Nonprofit organizations have an important role to play in advocating for and the development of OER from start to finish, recruiting learners, partners, researchers, evaluators, all areas of design and development. The final stakeholder is UNICEF, which provides funding to governments to support the development of standards and to support implementation. UNICEF has been a strong supporter and key leader in the development of ebooks for deaf learners. Now that we have covered the known stakeholders as identified by UNICEF, I would like us to consider where are the deaf human resources? Where are the deaf community members that can support the ebook creation process? Those elegant fluent signers, bilingual deaf teachers. Stakeholders producing ebooks need deaf human resources. What about linguistic resources? How can linguistic research of sign languages support translations and support pedagogy? So I propose these two resources be added to the list identified by UNICEF. So, we need a new framework. Let me share what I think it should look like. It should include universal design principles that fit the needs of deaf learners and eliminate those that do not. Design should include deaf aesthetics, capitalizing on the deaf learner's visual processing strengths. We must consider the 3 levels of accessibility and how the elements of each level can be incorporated into the new framework when producing our ebooks. Multimodal learning is key to the framework, not just engaging vision. We want to incorporate multiple modalities: touch, movement, hearing, speaking, writing. We want our lessons to engage multiple modalities. Research is needed to understand the lens or framework to guide ebook design and production standards and principles. What are the deaf learning theoretical frameworks that need to underpin ebook design? What is the necessary infrastructure for testing ebooks? Which partnerships should support that infrastructure? Partnerships should be deaf-led. Perhaps some centralized body can be created to focus on translations. Translations of text could be done first in Universal Sign. Universal Sign is somewhat like a contact language. It uses sign vocabulary from sign languages around the world. It uses gesture, but it is not a full-fledged language itself, yet could provide enough content so that it could be translated into the native sign language of the target country. In our research, we need to identify those prospective resources. Identify the countries who may wish to be involved. So this research would be looking beyond Canada and the US toward a network of partnerships with other countries, because creating e-book access to open education opportunities is not something that should be an undue expense for one group. A group of learners should not be left behind, left wanting. We need to form a network to get everything ready and in place. More research is required to determine how to move forward.